Okay. Hello, everybody. Um, the previous video I had a little bit of sound noise from the fan. I don't know if it's electronically or picking it up or not, but I have some fans in the background over here, and they kind of like went into the last video a little bit more than what I wanted. So, hello, Jeremy Martin. How you doing? So, anyway, I wanted to talk about philosophy a little bit. Honest Angel. Shalom, everybody. A lot of people have a lot of, they do a lot of philosophy, but before I get into that, I just wanted to put in a pitch. I want to put in the pitch for my previous video that I did that talked about Neanderthals. So what I wanted to do, I just wanted to go ahead and share the video, which I share a picture, just like a, I don't want to say a teaser, but just a little bit about the Neanderthal genome, how it influences the rest of the population, because a lot of people might not want to watch the whole video anyways, and it doesn't talk about it a whole lot anyway. So I just wanted to touch on that and see, we'll go from there, I guess. So let's see if we got this thing here working, and there we go, and we got the picture here. So this is two things actually. Says Denisovan, but it's actually supposed to be Neanderthal too. Anyway, I don't know why that is, but it's supposed to be Neanderthals down here with the red. You can see that in the other video. This picture doesn't show, but anyways. So the point being is that the red is the influence of the Neanderthal DNA. So a lot of the Neanderthals were found in Europe, which is a little bit puzzling to some people, but of course, according to my prediction, is that Europe is it's mixed with the other populations that are not Neanderthal, which I was showing, and I will get into philosophy, but I just had to show this about my other video in case somebody wanted to watch it, because the other video does go into a lot more detail about DNA in general and a lot of my other findings, but this is just one finding about the Neanderthal DNA. So you can see a high concentration here in known areas of Asian populations, right? So, but then again, why is there a lighter spot here? Which is interesting too, because I believe populations came over from the Mediterranean here into the United States as well, besides. But of course, you have the a huge red of Neanderthal in America, South America, from South American India, native Indians. So how does that correspond to Neanderthal DNA? If Neanderthals are over here in Europe, and probably in Asia too, whatever. In fact, yeah, I guess these are samplings of people, I don't know. But anyway. So it can be explained because if you understand that the populations of the world consist of descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And of course, this is Denisovan over here, this purple over here. But if you understand that the descendants are Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and how they mixed, then you can understand the results of this map that show a stark contrast here between this area here and this area here. And it's easily explained, as far as I'm concerned, because when you understand that there's three separate groups of people, and that the Neanderthals came from one of the groups of people, which is the Japhethites. So you know that all the Asians and Europeans and Americans came from Asia too. That's why that's all red here. So you would expect them to have a higher percentage of Neanderthal DNA in people descended from Japheth because of the fact that their Neanderthals were Japhethite. So, because that's my prediction, and the map bears this out. This is what I want to show. So these areas here, of course, we all know about Africans have less Neanderthal DNA, but they're not completely absent of it either, obviously, because they had the same father. Ham had the same father as Japheth, right? So he's not going to be completely devoid of Neanderthal DNA. But the interesting thing is the Semitic populations. The interesting thing to me is the Semitic population, because up in here in Europe you don't have Hamitic populations or African populations up here, and you don't have apparently don't have African populations here or here, right? Or do we? That's the point. So, but the point being in that the Semitic population, as to be expected, doesn't have that strong signature of Neanderthal DNA either, because the Semitic population, of course, is descended from Shem. And you wouldn't expect the Semitic population descended from Shem to have the same genetic makeup as the descendants of Japheth. And of course, we know who all the Japhethites are in Europe, up here in the north, Meshach and Magog, and the rest of this is all O here. O is very strong here, so O is Magog. But notice this area of the Middle Eastern population here, which is highly Semitic. Either it's Arab, or it's J2, or it's Jewish. Same thing with Anatolia and Iran and places. It's doesn't have as much of the R1A or R1B, which is in these areas as well. And of course, we know the R1A is Ashkenaz. He lived in Germany, which is just north of Italy. But the rest of this area is heavily influenced by Japheth because of the TY chromosome and the LY chromosome of Javan and Tiraz. Tiraz being the father of the Thracians, and Javan is the father of the Sea Peoples and these islands in the Mediterranean that also became Phoenicians that went to America, right? But of course, it wasn't only him. It was a mixture of North Africans as well, including the E and the B is found in America, including the J1, the J2, including the I1, the I2 and the I1. They went to America as Phoenicians here in America. And, and they, of course, they were mining gold and silver and everything and bringing it back to the temple in the days of King Solomon. And that's why they're represented there in America. The TY chromosome, the B, the E, the J1, the J2, the Q. Well, the Q came from there. But I think the Q came back also to the Middle East as well. Which I seem to remember a long time ago, that they were wondering why the Q from America was in the Middle East. But anyways, but I have to find that article or some evidence of that. So we notice here the Middle East is highly Semitic and lacking Neanderthal DNA. And see, this area here is also heavily influenced by Elamites that moved this way as as well as possibly some people of either Cushite descent or some African descent or something. So, so that's expected there too, if there's Semitic populations in this area. Now, the other thing is interesting to me is this area up here. Why is it lightly colored? Why is it lighter? And that would be because of the Israelites, the lost tribes of Israel that went up into Germany first. See, notice this is lighter in Germany. This area is lighter. This area over here is lighter, where you have the IY chromosome. This area here is lighter, where you have the IY chromosome. So these are Semitic populations as well. And that's why they have less Neanderthal DNA. Let me go over here. We already discussed America. That's lighter up in America. Now, how about this one here? How about we zoom in here? How about why is this starkly different here from the rest of South America? Well, as it turns out, Nimrod was a king in the land of Shinar. His descendants moved up through here, and of course it's lighter up through here. His descendants moved up through here, all the way over into America, and all the way down. Of course, this was early on, by the way. So early on, the descendants of Nimrod, early on after Nimrod was killed and his descendants, regained their composure and eventually kept moving all the way into America with a CY chromosome of Nimrod, of descendant of Cush. So they went all the way to America, and wait a minute, what's this here? Why the light spot right here? Or is it here? Anyways, that's close enough. You have a light spot here of, and this is the area of the Olmecs, or is it? It's probably this area here. But they probably pushed this way, migrated this way, and they probably migrated that way too, as far as that goes. But anyways, the Olmecs. This is shows influence of. It's not Semitic, right? Up here, it could be the J1, J2, the I2, the I1 up in this area here to influence America, right? But down here, would it be the Semitic populations that influence down here, all the way down here? Wouldn't seem to me to be. But anyways, the Olmec population, of course, as we know, does have the Olmec statues with African and Asian features. So early on, the descendants of Nimrod were here in America, this area, or this area here. And they went all the way down into this area here. As we know, the Indian tribes down here, the Auca Indians, the Waorani Indians, the Quechuas, and the Wayus, they all have the CY chromosome. And they're descendants of Nimrod, if they got the CY chromosome, right? So that, to me, shows why there's an influence here of non-Neanderthal genetic information in this area. And of course, by the way, I grew up right in this area here. The other video didn't show it because there was a lag. I said I grew up here, and then I moved my thing over here and said I grew up here, but it was right here where I grew up. But anyway, so I grew up here, so that's why I'm familiar with the story of the Waorani Indians, who are the descendants of Nimrod. But that's the extent of their travels, right? And of course, the rest of South America would be basically free of any other influence from either the African DNA or the Hamitic DNA or the Semitic DNA, because this is all Semitic. J1, this is all J1, and up in here too is all J1 or J2. This is all J2 and J1, and even in this areas. But of course, this is ancient Europe. I mean, this is the area of Europe, historically speaking, ancient Europe, which was Greece, of course, the Javans and the Thracians. And of course, you can see the heavy influence there of the Neanderthal DNA in these areas here. But you can also see the influence of the IY chromosome in these areas here, because this is definitely the areas of the IY chromosome, which is, of course, Semitic, descended from Abraham. And of course, up in these areas and up in Germany as well. So much so that when the Vikings invaded England and the Anglo-Saxons invaded England, it affected the English population as well, as to the extent or the amount of Neanderthal DNA that they have. So that was just basically, it's supposed to be just a review, but it turned out to be pretty exhaustive, I guess, which shows and proves beyond a doubt, as far as I'm concerned, is that Neanderthals are descendants of Japhethite, because they're not Hamitic and they're not Semitic, as you can see in these areas here. The Denisovans were like a later branch off, and I don't have the other map, but there is another map that shows Denisovan influence in this area as well, in this area of China. And the Denisovans by themselves are seen in this area here. They're also seen in South America too, but probably because of somebody that passed through this area and went to South America, and they appear, Denisovans DNA appears in South America as well. But so much for that exhaustive introduction, or supposed to have been tell you about my previous video. But now I want to talk about the subject, the topic of this video, and that is about what's the purpose of philosophy? What's the purpose of? A lot of people get carried away. They get carried away in the discussions, and they seem to lose track of what the purpose of the discussion is for, right? So, if science can't lead us to the truth, then what good is it? It's supposed to be, to find truth. If that's what the purpose of science is for, is to determine to verify what you can know. And if philosophy doesn't lead you to the truth, what good is it for? Or any of our other, pastimes or discussions or topics. What is the purpose of them? What is it good for? If it's not to lead us to truth, then it's missing the point. It's not arriving at its objective, what it's supposed to intend to do. So science originally, as we know, was intended to verify or prove the existence of God. That's all the founders of science who believed in God, and that was the purpose of their studies in God, was to show from nature, from the physical world, the evidence of a creator. And you have all the people, which I can't credit, like I maybe should, but people that came up with the laws of science and said that you can't have anything without it being put there or caused in some way or form, because nothing can cause itself, nothing can order itself, nothing can make itself. But anyways, science today has lost its main objective, of course, and it's been overrun by skeptics and unbelievers who really think they know something, and they've hijacked it to the point where they say they have truth, and they begin attacking the Bible, saying that the Bible is not true. So they missed the whole point and objective of ever doing science if it's not arriving at the truth. Because their claim is they're always saying that, yeah, we know what the truth is. We know this facts, and we say, are you sure about that? They said, well, you can't know everything for sure. And you ask them, well, what is the truth? They say, well, no, you can't. The truth is something you can't determine by science. Well, then what is it good for? If you can't determine what the truth is by studying science, and then what good is it? You know, sure you can reach the moon. Sure you can, have all these advances in technology and everything. But then what? Then what? What is it good for? What was it ultimately good for? Yeah, it saves life. Well, the whole point of the doing science and the founders of science was to save people, in a lot of ways. A lot of the medical profession is the same thing. They were all believers in God, and they found things that could save lives. And so we save lives, and then what? And then we all die anyway. So without ever knowing about what the truth is or coming to the knowledge of the truth. So we just kind of like still miss the whole point. So a lot of times when the you know even unbelievers or believers, doesn't matter who it is, you go around the room and say, well, can you tell me what the truth is, or what's the difference between Christians and non-Christians? And everybody looks at everybody, and it's like, you know a lot of times nobody knows what to say. It's like, what makes us different? What is it different? What is the truth to begin with? What's and so if that's the case, then there's no difference between a Christian and a non-Christian. And a lot of people go through, yeah, but you're better off being a Christian because you have live a better life and everything like that, which is true. But if you don't have the truth, or you don't know what the absolute truth is, then you're not really better off. I mean, you're better off from being affected and influenced by the teachings of the Bible and the truth and everything, just like Europe is, without even knowing it, that their habits and practices originated from the teachings of the Bible, while they turn around and, you know, reject the Bible and speak bad about the Bible and, go down the wrong road. Eventually they'll end up in a situation where they're not as well off as what they think they are right now. But anyways, if if we don't have the truth, then what good is it? What are we doing, like trying to convince people of God, if God doesn't have a truth, or if there is no absolute truth? If there's no absolute truth, of course we wouldn't even exist. There wouldn't be a God. Nothing would exist anyway. So there's got to be something that caused our existence, something that brought us here, something that put us here, and ordered our existence. You know, we were commanded, that commanded us to be who we are, what we are, by one way or by another, either by our teaching, by the influence, biologically, culturally, environmentally, whatever. It's all of God. It all came about by God. When you understand that everything does come from God. So, so what's the absolute truth that the unbelievers don't have that Christians do have? Of course, well, we have Jesus. That's the truth, right? And what's Jesus? Well, he's the absolute truth. He's the Savior. He's the Redeemer. He's the reason why we can exist before a holy God and not be incinerated. You know, and not be incinerated before His face. So, so our very existence proves, you know, if you're existing before a holy God and you're still existing, it proves that there's a provision for you that allows and makes possible your existence before a holy God who is perfect, who cannot have any imperfection. There's got to be a perfect provision for you that allows for you to exist, that covers you, that covers your sin, your mistakes, your errors, however you want to put it, that makes possible your existence. So, so that is the truth. But you know, sometimes even so, even in our philosophical ways, we like to say, well, yeah, you're saved by the blood. Yeah, okay, what does that mean? Yeah, we're saved by the provision of Jesus, without which we wouldn't have the Holy Spirit sent to us. Okay, this is all true. I mean, we as Christians know that the gospel is true and that we have to take the gospel to the world because it's the gospel that affects people and changes people's life, including the descendants of Nimrod all the way in South America. It transforms people's lives. It has the power to transform. That's true. And and it does. And it can transform anyone's life. It can transform an atheist's life. It can transform a Christian's life. You know, somebody that lived their whole life as a Christian, all of a sudden he realizes that the Word of God is true, it's living and active, and it's able to transform your life. You know, it could happen to anybody. But it happens a lot to people who have a lot of sin, like Paul the Apostle, or like a lot of people have this huge life transformation. But then again, there's people like James Tour that accepted God when he was like 17 or 18, and he lived the whole rest of his life following Jesus, discipling people, witnessing, knocking on doors, everything he could to help advance the cause of Jesus while getting a degree, getting his doctorate and everything, and and witnessing the whole way. And he suffered persecution for it, of course, because we should expect that, we can expect that, but it still didn't keep him from succeeding in a great way. And that's because of the power of God, the power of the Word of God in our lives and everything. But if we were to define what the truth is, because um, science can't determine what truth is. Supposedly, science can't. Or they say science can't tell you what the truth is or what's true. But they're not looking at all the evidence, or not considering all the evidence. And sometimes even philosophy can't. If philosophy does all this philosophizing and goes into ancient wisdom. I'm hearing about ancient wisdom, ancient philosophy and wisdom. Well, what did it help? Did it help Rome to keep it from falling? It didn't help anyone apparently. Completely. I mean, at least not in a way of knowing what the absolute truth is, because apparently nobody knows what the absolute truth is. I mean, we know it has to do with Jesus. We know it has to do with the gospel. But if you were to define and explain to everybody simply what the truth is for people to understand, and what makes Christians different, what makes creationists different than skeptics, is that we have the truth and they don't. So we have the responsibility to define what the truth is. So the truth is what? You know, if science can't explain it, if it's not in science, it's not in philosophy, everybody's, wrangling about words, talking about this definition, that definition, and, as if they're arriving somewhere, right? And somebody like Sky Out that we've been hearing lately, he seems to be a very bright, intelligent person, quick, and knows all this definition, knows a lot of verses, where the verses are at, and all this stuff. But ask him if he knows what absolute truth is. Probably couldn't tell you, unless he listens to the video. But anyway, so we know it has to do with the gospel. We know it has to do with the Bible. And yet the Bible is being attacked as being mythical. And even in Sky Out's situation, it doesn't really say what it says. Ask him to explain what a sediment layer, how it got there. He says, because geologists, because physicists, because satellites, because he doesn't know why the layers. He can't explain how the layers got there with fossils in them, buried over 100 million cubic miles over the whole face of the whole Earth. What's sticking out of the sea, what's not in the deep oceans. He can't tell you why there's over 100 million cubic miles of water deposited sediments on every continent with samples of living organisms that were living at the time of the flood. Well, that's your answer right there. They were animals and organisms living at the time that got buried by the global flood. The global flood is a fact. Study the Y chromosomes, you'll know that every family tree and every Y chromosome and maternal haplogroup, they have a single line all the way back to their origin, and in each case, it's 3 separate family trees. Now, if you look at the Simmons Genome Project, you'll notice that the Y chromosome trees are like closely packed together. The only ones not closely packed together is the African family tree, because they left out some information. But if they were to include all the information from the Berber E3M81 and the Egyptian E3V12 and the Kushite E3V32 and the Canaanite or possibly Canaanite E3M123, if all that information was in there, you would notice that it would be before the information that is there, and that would bring it a lot closer to the other 2 brothers, which were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, which when they started out, they of course had the same Y chromosome with modifications of their own, and their descendants, each of the descendants had their own modification. That's why we can track them. That's why we can use algorithms to make family trees, and that's why we can determine that each each of the Y chromosomes belongs to a branch on a particular family tree, going all the way back to its source, which makes 3 family trees, both with the Y chromosome and the mitochondrial maternal haplogroups as well. They all make 3 family trees, but of course, if you'll notice, there's spaces between the mitochondrial family trees, which shows to me that none of the 3 wives of the 3 sons of Noah were sisters. I believe the evidence is showing that they probably were not sisters that married. So that accounts for a lot of the diversity as well in the human populations. And of course, my observation is that the diversity happened early on, right away, and people then went into their family groups or stayed in those family groups and fixed those variations into their population from then on. So, even the Neanderthal would have had their own specific characteristics, which probably the rest of the world doesn't have. So, nobody else in the world has a Y chromosome to match their family tree because none of their descendants survived to this day. But they probably had variations of their own. So each family tree, if you look at the North Africans, which I believe are the Berbers today with the V3M81, they have their own characteristics, of course, and traits that of their own, and they're proud of who they are, of course, and they would not like to be included in the family of Egyptians, let's say, or the family descendants of Mitzrayim. And none of the families could or would fit in any of the other families. They're unique to their own features and uniqueness and abilities and everything. And they don't like to be represented as being someone else that they aren't. So those characteristics were fixated early on and became fixed because of the separation. Because if you're all together, then you're all mixed up, you're all mixing, and you're not going to know. Everybody's going to be, whatever. It's going to mix. It's going to be a conglomerate of features, right? But since the family spread out because of the probably the breakup of the continents, which is another can of worms, they separated. It was a traumatic event. It cut the lifespan in half a second time, and people separated into their family groups and started speaking their own languages as a result of being separated. And of course, that is what God intended to happen. So each of these different people groups, there was variation early on. Those variations were fixated into the different populations. And I believe the same thing happens with animals too, as far as the jaguar, the lion, the tiger, that they were separated early on. They fixated into their populations, and from then on they could only reproduce with each other, and they became what they are today. But of course, the animals separated early on too, and separated early on and fixated their populations. And in Africa, you have the leopard, of course, the lion, and the tiger in other places. But the leopard, you know, of course, was reproducing among themselves. And when South America broke apart from Africa, then that's when the jaguar was separated from the leopard, and his environment was such that he came to have the strongest bite of basically any of the animals is one of the strongest bite, or the strongest bite that they've been able to measure as far as, mammals or whatever that size. So, but it is the same animal. It's clearly the same animal. There's other examples. There's an aardvark in Africa. They call it the African ant bear. And it's, of course, we call it the aardvark in South America. And there's other examples. There's the African honey badger in Africa. Has its own version in South America called the greater grayson. It looks almost identical, has the same nature, habits, and everything. And nature, you know, it just has a different name because they got separated when the continents broke apart 100 years after the global flood. But that's when people started to separate into their family groups and consolidate and fix their genomes as to what we see today, except apart from the recent mixing of different cultures and things that we see today that's made possible by travel and communication and everything. But at least in this way, we can identify, people of different paternal and maternal family lines, and each of the lines going all the way back to Noah and his three sons. And of course, they not only go back to Noah and his three sons, but his grandsons and great grandsons, which are the table of nations, which we know from history. We know who the Thracians are. And we also know that Tiraz is the father of the Thracians. We know who the Europeans are, and we know that Gomer is the father of the Europeans. And of course, we know who Ashkenaz is. Ashkenaz is the son of Gomer, and that's the name that the Jews that went up the Rhine River into Germany that took on as their own name, Ashkenaz, is from the son of Gomer, who lived in that area. He's the R1A. His brother, Ashkenaz's brother, Riphath, is the R1B population. It's a totally separate branch. It's a totally separate branch that you can't put together. You can't take the R1A and then the R1B and try to put them together. They won't go together. Algorithmically, not algorithmically, but algorithmically, you can't do that. It's a separate line, but it's from the same family. And they recognize that from the start. That's why they have it R1A and R1B. Then there's an R2 who is Togarma. Togarma is the R2. It goes on and on and on. But the point, got to get back to the point of the video as to what the truth is. The truth is that the Bible is absolutely true. Scientists are trying to distract and detract from the Bible, trying to say it's mythology, because other cultures have similar stories. They all started as the same family. Of course they're going to have similar stories. Of course they're going to be comparable. Of course they're going to be using the same words. But they're not going to be conveying the same truth. And that was the whole point of Messiah, is to bring truth into the world, and to enlighten the worlds. The light to lighten Gentiles. Hello, Reeve Divine Living. So So the Bible is redeemed, but the Bible is verified by science, by history, by genealogies, by facts of geology, genealogies, archaeologies. They keep finding, digging up things from Israel, and if we're not too careful, they might dig up the temple treasures and show that to the world. So, I mean, if that's a possibility. I mean, if they have really found the temple treasures where they say they found them near the Dead Sea in 56 different places, buried 12 feet under the ground, then if that's true, and they start pulling these silverware items that were cut up and were brought back and cut up, and you start digging these things up from history in these temple treasures, the shining room. What's the shining room? The shining room is the Holy of Holies, where you take a candle, you bring a candle into the shining room, and the whole room is filled with light. That's the shining room. That's the Holy of Holies. So it's all being verified. It's all true. Never was false. No one never had a valid claim. But these people like Skyup, they think they have so much knowledge and so much information and so much philosophy and so much learning, so much they think they know everything, except they don't. They can't tell you what the truth is. They don't know what absolute truth is. So I guess before making this video too long, I'll just come out and tell you what the absolute truth is, which I've said many times before. Anybody that's listened to me or watched me write in chats, the absolute truth, of course, is that we have a creator, and that only our creator is able to perfectly cover for us himself, and he's the only one able to remake us again by the power of his true word, as nobody else can. That's the absolute truth, and that's the point of science. That's the point of philosophy. That's the point of everything we do. That's the point of the gospel being taken to the whole world. Is for everybody to know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So with that, I guess that's enough. And God bless everybody. Take care. Shalom. And stay close to God, because the Bible says, draw near to God and he will draw near to you. So there's a secret. It's not by anything you do. It's by being convinced that the Word of God is true by God, and he draws you to himself with his truth, and he remakes you again from the inside out by his truth, as nobody else can, by his Spirit. His Spirit speaks to you in a way that nobody else can, and his Spirit encourages you, builds you up, edifies you, and in the same way that we're edified and built up and encouraged, we have to do the same to edify and encourage each other. So that's the whole point of being a Christian, because it's true that if a firebrand is by itself, it tends to go out. But you take a whole bunch of firebrands and put them together, and you have a huge, strong, powerful flame, which can ignite a lot more. So that's about it, I guess. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So God bless everybody. Everybody take care, and stay with God. Hello, Timothy. How are you doing? see. All right. God bless everybody.